Well, welcome everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for our What's New in College Admissions webinar. Good afternoon or evening or morning for whoever is logging in from wherever. I know we have families around the world that are tuning in today. I wanted to introduce myself, and my colleague will introduce herself. We'll go over the premise of this discussion, and we'll go ahead and get started. Just so everyone knows, my name is Bridgette Yee McIntyre. I am the Director of Integrated Programs at CTY. I've been at CTY for, looking at the calendar, for 13 years. And before that, I spent about a decade in college admissions. On that side of the desk, I reviewed highly selective program applications for liberal arts college in the Northeast. And since then, while at CTY, I've been working with college admissions professionals doing workshops like this. And so anyone who will talk to me knows that I will talk to anyone about college admissions for as long as they let me. So I will try to make sure I give Micaiah a lot of space as well to talk about admissions. And go ahead and introduce yourself, Micaiah.
Okay, hello everyone. I'm really happy to be here. My name is Micaiah Jackson, and I manage the CTY Scholars Program, which is a college counseling and academic advising program for CTY students who are high achieving and come from low-income backgrounds. So we accept students into the program in the 8th grade, and then students work with educational advisors throughout their 4 years of high school. And students in our program typically receive full or near full scholarships to highly selective colleges around the country. And so my perspective comes from working with this group of families. And I've been with CTY for a little over 14 years now.
So again, I was really excited when Stacey and her team asked if I and Micaiah would be interested in talking about college admissions, and I thought it was perfect timing. Micaiah and I both went to the National Association for College Admissions Counseling Conference. This year it was held in Baltimore, so it was in our hometown where CTY is, and we were able to meet with other professionals in the field, have great discussions about what's new in admissions, what's the same but is still a really hot topic. And we wanted to share some of those perspectives with you. And again, about the format, we would like to talk for maybe about 20 minutes. And I have some things I want to definitely touch on. But in my experience, when we were doing admissions presentations, we'd like to give you some foundational information and then leave a lot of time for questions so we can find out what you want to know and answer the questions about the information you're curious about. So that's how we will sort of go about today. I wanted to talk to Micaiah a little bit just because of your experience working with CTY students. And I know you're working with a certain population, but after doing this for 15 years, you've got quite a portfolio of students that you've worked with and families that you've worked with. So before we get too into the conference and what we were hearing there, some of the really common stories from CTY families, whether they're in scholars or people I meet on the road, or different programs that we're doing, we're working with 2nd through 12th grade families, and I've got families from a really young age to junior and senior year, just really overwhelmed by this whole process and feeling like they're getting a lot of different information from a lot of different people, and the information doesn't always match. And also the information stresses a lot of people out. So as a foundation for everyone today, our goal is also to sort of relieve some of that stress and make you feel like you have a lot of knowledge and a resource in us in this process, so you can feel more confident as you're going forward in the process. But for starters, Micaiah, like when families are super overwhelmed and really don't even know where to start, what do you tell them? How do you help them just sort of start that process?
Yeah, so I began working with students when they're in the 9th grade. And the most overarching concern that CTY Scholars family have is typically college affordability. They see the price tags on these colleges and it feels really, really overwhelming for them. But I tell them that there are lots of myths out there about being able to afford college. So I mentioned that most of the expensive colleges around the country have great financial aid packages for limited income families. So don't let that initial cost of the college dissuade you from thinking that college is an option for you if you are a high achieving student. Also, in terms of aspects that can be overwhelming, some families are concerned about what exactly it is that colleges are looking for. And so first and foremost, I tell them to think about GPA and rigor of classes. So typically at our workshops, especially fall of 9th grade, I tell students at the beginning of each marking period, act as if you have an A in every single class, and your job is to maintain that A. And sometimes that helps students feel a little bit less overwhelmed. So I talk about, aim high, aim for those A's, B pluses. Think about the rigor of classes and how you challenge yourself. So many colleges will compare your high school transcript to your high school profile to make sure that you took some of the most rigorous classes that are offered at your school. So as early as 9th grade, try to access your school's high school profile, which most of the time can be found on your school's website, or you can ask your school counselor about it, and view your high school profile so that you have really good knowledge of what classes are offered at your high school and start thinking about how you can take those classes. So I would chart out a 4-year plan if you can, so that you have an idea of what classes you're going to take during your time in high school.
Yeah, and talking about financial aid, I mean, we're also talking about scholarships, right? So a lot of those, they're more expensive private schools and public schools have a lot of really great scholarships available as well. We can go into some detail on a little bit later on like what colleges are looking for those scholarships. But based on that the high school profile too, you reminded me that a lot of families are also worried because they say, well, in my school, I only have a choice, or they only let me take one AP school class a year, or they only offer honors and college prep. We don't even have APs, or my school doesn't rank, or my school grades on a different grading scale. So that high school profile is really important for families to understand, but also for the college admissions officers to look at. And they do look at that alongside that transcript. So when they are looking at you as a student, as an applicant, they're not saying, well, there's only 3 AP classes and so from school Z that, took 12. But if they look at your high school profile and they see that you were only allowed to take 1 a year, or they didn't offer AP in your school, or your GPA isn't weighted like other schools weight their GPAs. So they're going to compare you based on what resources are available to you and what opportunities were available to you. So admissions officers want you to take advantage of those opportunities, but are not going to say, why didn't you do X, Y, and Z when that wasn't even available to you? So I think people get really worried that, they don't have as many opportunities because of the high school they're going to. And admissions officers know that. So don't worry about things you can't control, right? You can't control what school you went to, but you can control what opportunities you take care of or you take advantage of.
Definitely. And I would also say that if you find that you're not being challenged enough in high school, look into dual enrollment opportunities where you can take college level classes at maybe a local community college or a local 4-year college while you're enrolled in high school. And your school might even have a partnership with a local college where you can take classes at your school that are taught by college professors, whether they're community college professors or 4-year college professors. Look into those opportunities. You might not be aware of them right off the bat, so definitely ask your school counselor if those partnerships exist.
Yeah, and that's always a bonus when looking at the college application. As an admissions officer, seeing that you went above and beyond, instead of sort of throwing up your hands and saying, well, that's all I was able to do, those dual enrollment programs are always showing that you have that intellectual curiosity, that drive, that looking for a challenge. Those are all big positives when, applying to colleges. Getting into more details about the application and that process of starting the applications for college, what types of tips do you have for families, things that a typical family may overlook or not consider when they're filling out their application? What types of tips can we give our families, Micaiah, to stand out in that process?
Well, aside from doing well academically, I encourage students to get involved in activities that they're genuinely interested in, and not just because they think it'll look good for college. You know, make sure that your passion for something shines through on your application. So think about what you're doing outside of the classroom. What sorts of things are you curious about? How do you pursue your interests? And how can you demonstrate your interest in these different activities? So whether you're doing like an independent study with a teacher, working on some sort of research project, taking an academic enrichment class, whether it's online or maybe in person during the summer, like CTY classes. Think about those things. I've had students in our program who've started businesses while they were in high school. I have a student now in my program who has partnered with an NGO to help underserved families in West Africa, which is wonderful. And I also had a student in my program who took what he learned from our college counseling workshops and made a club at his school and taught low-income students from middle schools in his area the things that we sort of covered in our workshops. So he was giving back to his community in that way, which is great.
Yeah. And Micaiah, just correct me if I'm wrong, that's sort of like what we're hearing when people start visiting colleges and universities. That's like their hook, right? So that's something you're going to hear when you're visiting these colleges, or you talk to other professionals in the field. They're going to say, like, what's your hook? And that's what Micaiah is talking about. So really, students that have that drive for something in particular, and Micaiah students are, she'll agree, are off the chart. They really have some amazing ideas and some really cool opportunities that they take advantage of, or they make for themselves. But
Right.
You don't always have to be like super extravagant. Like, you don't have to have worked on the Congress floor if you're interested in political science, but like something that just shows that you have that interest. But also remember that students, especially when the process is starting early in that 8th and 9th grade year, like, you're going to dabble in different things. But once you find that thing that you really like, you can stick with that and really that can shine through on your application.
Yeah. And so make sure that you're developing leadership roles and some of the activities that you really enjoy. And don't by any means feel like you've got to join a million different activities. I actually had one student who focused on one activity throughout his 4 years of high school, and that was robotics. So he revived a robotics club at his school, participated in competitions, and turned it into a really impressive and successful club. I have another student who's currently in our program, and she's starting a nonprofit, and she's actually in 10th grade. And it's an area that she's really been passionate about for years. And we were talking one day, and I said, you can really turn this into your own nonprofit. And so she's getting that off the ground, and it's really exciting for her. So, that's just an example of how she's going in the direction of her passions.
Mm-hmm.
And I will also include that some students may not necessarily be able to get involved in extracurricular activities because they have a lot going on at home. So I have a student who's in a single parent household. Mom works nights and into the morning, and each morning she gets her 3 younger siblings up and gets them ready for school each day. So that's something that she can add to her college applications that she wasn't able to be involved in, all these other maybe in school or out of school activities, but she has been taking care of 3 siblings quite often. So that's something that can count as well.
Yeah, definitely. Now, Micaiah, you have had your students go on to some amazing schools, some of these super highly selective schools that everybody's talking about, and then also schools that are the perfect fit for that student. So it might not be the one that everyone hears about on the news, or the 4% admit rate schools, even though your students do get into those schools as well. But so how do you help them and what resources do they use to make that college list when they're thinking about where to apply, to make sure they're not overreaching, but also making sure that they're finding a place to attend. Like,
Right.
how do they start that list?
So aside from some of the more obvious things like campus size, student to faculty ratio, distance from home, I really encourage students to research colleges to see what their majors and potential minors might look like. I encourage students to read through the course descriptions that they review on each college's website so that you have an idea of what classes you'd be taking if you went to that school. You can learn more about the professors who are teaching at the college. I've worked with students who have completed online or summer programs with different professors, and they've kept in touch with them throughout high school. And then when they decided to apply to that school, they already had the support and sometimes also a recommendation from that professor. And that has been really helpful. So dig deep, see what classes you'll be taking. And compare, what classes you'll be taking at different colleges. You might like one professor more in terms of what that professor's concentration is. You might like what's offered at this computer science department more than another computer science department. And I also suggest that students look at statistics in terms of retention, how many students are going back for sophomore year, graduation rates. What kinds of jobs and internships do students typically get when they graduate from this college? Maybe what companies come on campus typically to recruit? Those are all different things that you might want to consider.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and another, I love the idea of looking at course descriptions. I've never told families to do that, so that's good advice, to look at the course descriptions and see what classes you would take. Another thing I like to share with families is to really get a good feel for the campus environment, to look at college publications. So you can read the student newspaper, it's probably all online too, the student magazines, different publications and clubs that they have, just to kind of get a good vibe for the hot topics on the campus, what students are really passionate about, what's moving them, what's driving them to act in any way. So the political climate on campus, it can really help you get a good feel, especially when it's hard to visit so many schools. And when you're starting early, you maybe want to, but you probably don't have all the time to see all the colleges in person. So that's a really great place to start.
That is a great point, because virtual tours have become increasingly popular also. So if you can't get to campus for an in-person tour, consider doing a virtual tour. I've done them and they're really good. You really kind of feel like you're on campus. I mean, it's as close to being on campus as you can be virtually. But think about those opportunities as well.
Yeah, and something from the conference, and at this conference, they have a really large vendor expo area, and I spent a lot of time there just kind of seeing like the cool new gadgets and tools for admissions. And they have and this is for people who would have like a VR set, but they have programs that colleges are investing in where they can have like a virtual reality tour. So that was pretty cool, and people are trying that out. So anyway, yes, things have certainly improved because we were forced to be at home for a few years, and now it's just more convenient to do things from home. So we have access to more things now, and things are improved. And one thing, as far as a tool for making that college list, something that they announced at the conference, Slate, which is a company that helps manage applications for colleges and universities, announced that they're going to create a free site, and they're launching it. It's called start.edu, and that's where you can select those even going before what Micaiah was saying about the research, like just making that initial list of college size and location and what programs, what majors you want, what clubs and activities. It's similar to some people at schools have Naviance. This is free though, so you don't have to pay for that subscription to Naviance for counselors, for parents and families and students. And you can create an account. It holds all your information, and it understands that things will change, so you can adjust that profile. Schools will be able to upload documentation, so your transcript can live there, your list of extracurricular activities. And once you start building your account, you'll start to match with colleges, and colleges will be able to see that your student is interested in their school, and they can do a little more direct marketing right to the families, because right now, well, not right now, but the process is changing. Historically, colleges and universities would buy names from the college board. It would be thousands and thousands of names of students who've taken the SAT or ACT or whatever AP test, and maybe somewhat fit into the demographics of what they're looking for applications, and just send mass mailings. And it's not really the most efficient way to inform students, because I'm sure, or anyone in high school now, you're getting things from schools, you're like, where is this? I've never heard of this. I'm not interested at all. Sometimes it works because it's like, wow, what's this school? Let me research, and then you become interested. But this is a really cool site that's going to allow the schools to see that you're a really good match to market to, and to give you more information on, and you can get more information. And it's also, like I said, more efficient, because right now, not as many people are taking the SAT or ACT because of all the different test options that we have for admissions. So, so that's something you should look into. They're still building the site. I tweeted at their Technolutions account to say, like, hey, I'm doing this presentation. Does anyone know when it's going to launch officially? And I didn't hear back, because they're probably building the site and doing other things. But it's going to be up soon, and it's going to be free forever, and it's going to be a really cool site. So we're really excited about that resource for students and families. So it's start.edu. But speaking about students that take the SAT less, I mean, I think that it's a slight trend right now that students don't feel they need to take the SAT or ACT because we have the test optional process. And that's not necessarily a new topic that came up at the conference, but it's certainly a hot topic at the conference. Everyone was talking about test optional, how confusing that process is. The test required is kind of self-explanatory. You have to submit scores to apply to the school, but then there's test optional where you don't have to, and so it's on the family sort of to decide when to submit scores or not. But then there's some programs or scholarships that require scores, a test optional school. So it's really confusing. And then we have test blind schools where you are not, they will, black out the test scores on your transcript. They will not consider your scores at all. But there's a really big gray area with that test optional piece. So Micaiah, like, what have you been telling your families? Like, how do you help them decide when to submit scores, when not to submit scores?
So typically I tell families that you should look at each college that is on your list, and consider how your scores compare to the academic profiles of recently accepted students. So if your SAT or ACT score falls above the middle 50% of scores, you may want to include them. Conversely, if your scores fall below the middle 50%, you may want to exclude those scores. And just remember that if you do not include your scores, other aspects of your application will be more heavily scrutinized. So be prepared to emphasize your academic abilities, leadership skills, and talents. I would also say be mindful of whether or not your scores are required for certain programs. So whether it's maybe an honors program at a less selective college, merit scholarships, or maybe a particular engineering program at a college, they might require scores, even if this college is test optional. So do your research and look into that information for each school. Also, have an idea of whether or not your scores are automatically going to be on your high school transcript, because you don't want to say, oh no, I'm not submitting scores, but then have those scores automatically go to schools anyway. You want to know how colleges are going to treat that. I'd be mindful of those things.
Yeah, I wanted to ask, I know we want to get to the Q&A, and I knew we were going to have more to say than we had time for, but one other really new thing that was coming up at the conference, and I wanted Micaiah just for you to share a little bit. You went to like a session on math at the crossroads, talking about a study done by Just Equations, a non-for-profit company. People can look up their website and we can send that link. But what did you learn about like the math the new math information about calculus and statistics and like courses that students are taking in high school and how they
Yeah.
college.
There have definitely been lots of different conversations about math sequence and when you should take certain classes. And of course, some folks may be more knowledgeable about how these classes are considered in college applications. So historically, applicants who've taken calculus or above tend to be more competitive applicants to selective colleges. And it's important to establish, I would say, the math sequence that a student is going to pursue early on. Sometimes even in 6th grade, you kind of want to have an idea of what math classes a student is going to take. Because ideally, students who've taken algebra, typically before 9th grade, are in a better position to be in calculus at least by senior year. But in recent years, there have been even more discussions about focusing on classes that help students enhance their quantitative reasoning skills. And alternative paths. So, for example, I've had students who've taken classes like discrete math, data science. A lot of students have been taking statistics, and they've found these classes to be helpful in college. But again, many colleges still want you to have calculus on your transcript, especially if you're pursuing a STEM major. But a prospective liberal arts major might be fine with taking statistics and not calculus. So it depends on the college, and often colleges will list on their websites what classes you need to take in order to be considered a competitive applicant to that school. So do your research into each college that you're interested in.
Yeah, and quickly too, I think part of Just Equations, that what they're trying to do is then go back and inform colleges and universities and show the research that says students that take statistics are just as successful as students that are taking calculus in non-STEM majors, right? So if we've got, especially at CTY, a lot of humanities majors or humanities students interested in humanities who probably are not excited about AP Calc, but could maybe better manage statistics. Maybe I'm just speaking about myself, but like I much would have rather to take statistics than calculus in high school my senior year. And the field is changing, and we're trying to learn more about how to make sure we're reaching all different populations, those strong in math and those who are not. And so we're still doing that research to figure out what types of courses are the most helpful for success in college. I know we need to get to Q&A, and that was not all of the things I wanted to talk about, but maybe we'll get it in the Q&A session. I know Stacy probably has some questions coming in, but thank you everyone for joining us. As we toss it over to Q&A, we will be in touch, and we look forward to future webinars.